Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of Now that the heat of summer is bearing down on us, I would like to take this opportunity to review the supernatural novella Goddess of Filth by Castro. Because not only does this story take place after high school graduation, but for some strange reason, I've always felt that it was suitable to read possession stories in the warmer months. Now, before I get started, I would just like to note that Goddess of Filth is a book that I received because I'm subscribed to the book club called Nightworms. And since this is the second book I've read that they had sent me, I can wholeheartedly say that being subscribed to Nightworms is well worth the investment because they have great product, and had it not been for them, I'm afraid this book might not would have fallen into my hands. So for that reason, I'm very grateful to Nightworms. Also, I would like to add that I buddy read this with Hanny and Nisa, who are two of my good online friends. Which I'm really happy we had the opportunity to read this together because it allowed us to have a lot of deep discussions about the book's social commentary. Plus, this was just an exciting book to experience together as a group, especially since the plot took us by surprise. And because of what happens, I can honestly say I've never read a possession story like this before. So, major kudos to Castro for being able to provide something that I had not expected. But before I gush too much and get too far ahead of myself, let's head off and visit Fernanda and celebrate her birthday. Goddess of Filth by Castro opens up during the hot months of summer and introduces a group of teenage girls who are celebrating the birthday of their friend Fernanda. And even though they have ample opportunity to just simply throw her a basic party, they decide to conduct a seance where a girl named Lourdes is expected to lead this ceremony. Well, since none of them have any experience with the supernatural, Lourdes extends an open invitation to practically any spirit out there. And once Lourdes is able to successfully conjure an entity that existed before the world became what it is today, this circle of friends is met with the unexpected. Because with Lourdes' invitation, this causes Fernanda to undergo a possession from a powerful Aztec goddess. Then, as the story progresses, despite the horrors that Fernanda appears to be undergoing, she eventually realizes, regardless of what anyone says or thinks, this particular possession is one of liberation. In an interview conducted by the Horror Writers Association, it was revealed Castro has been writing horror short stories since childhood, and that her love for darker subjects began with her fascination of Mexican folklore and Texas urban legends. After high school, Castro attended Drexel University, where she gained a bachelor's degree in political science and history. As an author, Castro explained that horror has allowed her to explore her identity, history, and gender, and she makes an effort to focus on Latinx characters because they are so poorly represented in genre fiction as stereotypes. However, at the same time, she likes to play with the stereotypes to reclaim their narratives. Castro is a two-time Bram Stoker Award-nominated Mexican-American author, a Latinx literary advocate, and co-founder of Fright Girl Summer, which is a platform to amplify marginalized voices. Fun facts! For those who don't realize it, there is an actual goddess of filth, and due to the research I conducted, this is what I found out. Tlazotl is an Aztec earth mother goddess who is known as a filth deity, and she is represented by sexual impurity and sinful behavior. Throughout history, this goddess has been known to have four guises that represent different stages of life. In a youthful form, she is seen as a carefree temptress, whereas in her second form, she is perceived as a destructive goddess of gambling and uncertainty. Yet, like V. Castro's novella, it is in her middle age where she is acknowledged as a goddess who is able to eat away human sin. And last, in her final manifestation, she is seen as a destructive hag who preys upon youths. Included among her names, she is known as the goddess of cotton, the eater of excrement, and the goddess of filth. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers section, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, all you have to do is scroll down to the comments and you'll see a pinned comment at the top with the timestamp in it. Once you click that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few of my favorite moments. First up was when Fernanda had the chance to have an internal conversation with the goddess, and everything got laid out on the table. Now, up to this point, Fernanda had shown the basic trope signs of a possessed person. Like her eyes and voice had changed, she started speaking in a different language, and when she crawled about, she had these animalistic movements. Not to mention, she expelled a black sludge like it was her period. And even though the girls want to tell their parents what happened and try to get help, they're afraid to do so because they're drunk and they don't want to get in trouble. So, because of this, Lourdes steps up and tries to take care of the situation. Well, after Lourdes has Fernanda stay the night, she drops her off at home the following day. And once Fernanda's alone, she notices this strange ringing in her head that morphs into a woman's voice. But even though this entity is speaking to her, unfortunately, it's speaking in a language that Fernanda doesn't understand. However, they are able to finally communicate, and this is when the entity explains that she's inside her due to Fernanda's collective anger and strength. Now, at first, Fernanda thinks that she's going insane, but the entity that's introduced herself as a goddess explains that she can show her many things if that's what Fernanda wants. Then, as the conversation continues, the goddess elaborates further by explaining she's always had an affinity for humans, and this world needs hope. Also, she wants to build something everlasting like the pyramids in Mexico, but at the same time, she wants to be able to hold it in her hand. At this point, the goddess continues by saying every culture has a conduit, and Fernanda has a lot to learn about life and herself. And if Fernanda wants to become a conduit and experience this growth, then she can help her do that. And as they continue speaking on the matter, the goddess admits that there will be times where she has to take over Fernanda's body until they reach a compatibility. So, after everything is laid out, Fernanda agrees that this is a good idea and she gives the goddess consent. Y'all, I was not expecting this twist because I've never encountered a possession story where the possessed person and the spirit they harbored could hold a conversation. And before going into this book, I had no idea who the goddess of filth was. So I was expecting something that was complete and utter chaos. Yet I was really surprised to see I was met with an entity that was very reasonable and encouraged Fernanda to become empowered and to grow. On top of that, I was really happy Fernanda had a choice in her possession, because in the past, when I had read up on different religions, I discovered it's not always a bad thing to receive a possession, especially when it comes down to Santeria or voodoo. And much like those real life positive circumstances, that's the case with this book. So I was really happy to see how this book addressed that subject. Also, I really enjoyed the perspective we gained with Fernanda. Like, for example, due to Fernanda's actions when the goddess took over, I could totally see where a bystander would believe she was possessed by a demon. However, because of us having the insight that Fernanda and the goddess shared, we understand that this is nothing more than something similar to growing pains, as she and the goddess are becoming adjusted in the same body. So it was really cool to gain this insight on how something that is so liberating and so empowering could appear to be frightening and horrific to someone who doesn't understand. My next favorite moment was when Father Marino got his comeuppance. So, leading up to this, Fernanda's mom had reached out to Father Moreno because Fernanda had been shredding her hands on roses, squatting in the front yard, and doing a lot of other things that she would consider to be shocking and sinful. Well, after Lourdes arrived at Fernanda's home to confess to Father Marino that they had held a seance, he explained to her that Fernanda had been masturbating in black makeup, which, like the pervert he is, he asked her if they had done anything filthy to one another. But of course, to try to mask his sexual curiosity, he tried to play this off like an answer was important for religious purposes. Shortly thereafter, we see that Father Marino is truly a sick bitch. Because, for one, while he's praying to God for guidance, he admits that it's okay if Fernanda has to die to prove that the wages of sin are death. Then, after that, we discover that even though he appears to be this man of God, he actually has the corpse of a woman named Martha hidden in his freezer. And the kicker is, he's still sexually attracted to her dead body. From here, Father Marino starts stalking Fernanda, and he decides that he wants to kill her and put her in his freezer next to Martha. So, after Father Marino kidnaps Fernanda, he takes her to the church where he tries to perform a successful exorcism while recording it. Yet, during this time, the goddess allows Martha to rise from the freezer, and she's finally able to exact her revenge on Father Marino, who had robbed her of her life. Then Martha grabs Father Marino by the head, and after she shoves her fingers in past his skull, he goes into this comatose state. You know, this is the first time I've ever encountered a possession story where I was happy that the priest had his ass handed to him. Because up until this point, every movie or book that I had come across always portrayed the priest as being a troubled character who was able to overcome personal demons where he could become a stronger hero at the end. However, that's not the case with this book, because much like in real life where not every priest is a good person, Father Marino totally deserved what he got. Also, I was really happy that the author didn't go overboard with detail in regards to how grotesque Martha may have appeared, or how bloody the wounds were that Father Marino had suffered. And because of that, my imagination was able to create some pretty horrific imagery. So I truly applaud the author for allowing us that privilege. And since this work isn't splatterpunk, I fear had the ending become too grotesque, it would have taken away from the book's charm. Also, I really enjoyed how the ending presented us with a poetic justice, because while Father Marino had stolen Martha's life, she was able to turn the tables and rob him of his life by putting him in a comatose state where he would have to spend the rest of his days in an asylum. And even though he didn't die, I like to think that he wishes he was dead. My final favorite moment was the ending. Now, leading up to this, lords had approached the goddess and explained that if she's going to live in this world, there are certain rules that she has to abide by. And if she can't respect those rules, then she's going to have to go. Well, after that, we jump to a different scene. And this is where two human traffickers are trying to kidnap Fernanda. But before they can do anything, the goddess takes over and demands to hear their sins. But as Fernanda is sucking the female kidnapper's soul out of her mouth, the male kidnapper jumps out of his truck with a taser. However, Fernanda is able to break his hand and ram the taser in his mouth. After that, the goddess explains to Fernanda that they will make changes, but not like this. And at that point, the book ends on a note where Fernanda's friends have become her followers. So this ending was completely badass because as I was reading about Fernanda's possession, I was completely blindsided that there was a possibility Fernanda could become elevated to what I felt like was the status of a high priestess. And after I finished my read, I just felt completely blown away because it really seems like I had just read a book that chronicled the formation of a coven. Aside from that, I was really happy that while the goddess was going to live in our world and somewhat abide by our rules, she was not going to take any shit. Which that was really refreshing because it made me feel like her followers would be taken care of. Also, I really loved how it felt like she did achieve her goal while at the same time helping Fernanda become liberated. I would like to use this opportunity to bitch about Father Marino. So, even though there were other characters in this book that burnt my ass, Father Marino was like what would happen if Pat Robertson mated with Ted Bundy and they produced a hell spawn that needed to be tossed into the river. Now, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but the first time I wanted to wrap my hands around this little bastard's turkey neck was when he was so totally at peace with the idea of letting Fernanda die if it proved the wages of sin are death. And to be honest, a part of me wants to ask what kind of a sick splat of vomit would wish death on someone else to justify their fanaticism. But of course, if I wanted my answer, all I'd have to do was turn on social media. Then, before I had a chance to cool down from that bullshit, it's revealed this sick pervert's been pitching a pup tent over the dead woman in his freezer. And you know what? I understand that a priest is married to the Bible and everything, but had someone simply explained to him that masturbation won't make you go blind and it's okay to love yourself, he might not would have had this corncob up his ass the whole time. Anywho, I think this jerk-off got exactly what he deserved, and while he's stuck in this asylum for the rest of his life, I hope he gets trapped with a nurse who is so unhinged that every time that nurse's shadow darkens his doorway, a little dribble of piss leaks out of him. Goddess of Filth by V. Castro was a breath of fresh air for a subgenre that felt like there was no wiggle room for anything new. And even though we only spent a small amount of time with its characters, their development was pretty solid. But more important, this tiny book packed in a lot of serious commentary on gender, female empowerment, consent, and religious fanaticism. Character-wise, after we finished our buddy read, Hanny pointed out to me that I needed to research the meaning behind Lord's and Fernanda's names, which, upon doing so, I discovered both names had a biblical meaning to them. And even though I'm not certain if the author deliberately did this or not, I do feel like their names are significant to the context of this book. For example, in real life, the name Lourdes is a reference to the Virgin Mary. And in this book, Lourdes is loyal to Fernanda and she tries to advise her and the goddess throughout. But more importantly, similar to the Virgin Mary, Lourdes is responsible for bringing forth a spiritual deity in the flesh. However, under this circumstance, it's not through pregnancy. Instead, it's because Lourdes called out into the unknown. So, because of that, had it not been for Lourdes, there's a good chance the goddess would have never been in Fernanda's body to start with. Now, as far as Fernanda and the goddess are concerned, in real life, the name Fernanda has origins that are Hebrew and it means one who raises. Which, by the time we get to the end of the book, that's exactly what Fernanda does. But more importantly, Fernanda acts as a vessel so the goddess not only has the opportunity to make her goals come true, but the goddess is now having a tangible experience in a human body. Kind of similar to how it's believed that Jesus was a vessel so God could have a human experience. Theme-wise, the main focus of this work is gender. And while it shows us what it's like to be a young female, it also shows us what it's like to be a young Latina. Which, as we're granted this perspective, it shows how young females are approached every day by predators, and more times than not, there's nothing done about it. For example, there's a moment when Lourdes reflects a time in her childhood when she and her mother went to a restaurant and a creepy waiter gave her a free piece of pie. Which, because of how this plays out, it reminds me of how some jerk in a bar might give someone a free drink with the expectations of something more. But even though Lourdes rejects the offering, her mother explains that she should eat it and be grateful. Which, of course, as Lourdes eats the pie, the waiter watches her in this really perverted and uncomfortable way. And to be honest, I'm uncertain if Lourdes' mother dismissed this perversity due to the poverty they were in, or if she was actually that naive. Either way, it was pretty sad. Aside from that, there's other instances that pop up, such as a guy who is committing date rape, a woman who gets murdered and is kept as a trophy in a freezer, and we also have human traffickers who are both male and female. As far as being a young Latina is concerned, this book comments on white privilege and how what may come easy for one race might not be the same for the minority. And one of the ways this is shown is by how Fernanda's mother stresses how important it is for Fernanda to go to college. Which, of course, it's important for any child to go to college. But considering Fernanda's family are minorities, this adds a deeper level of concern for Fernanda's mother, as Fernanda has been met with the opportunity to go to college due to her hard work. And we see that this is actually a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her because her family is not wealthy. Another focus of this work is female empowerment, and how when a person is becoming empowered, they will go through growing pains of some sort. May those growing pains be physical, mental, spiritual, or all the above. Which, in my opinion, I think that a possession story is the perfect opportunity to explore this concept. Like, for example, we see where Fernanda goes from being mild-mannered and docile to becoming a strong standing character who becomes a leader. Meanwhile, this is happening as she's going from being a child to an adult. And I wish I could elaborate on this just a little bit more, but if I did, I'm afraid I would give away some spoilers. But just know that had it not been for Fernanda's possession, she would not have become the empowered character that we see at the end of this book. Another subject that's focused on is consent, and this is seen throughout the book in many different ways. Like, for example, we have where Lourdes is forced to eat a piece of pie against her will. We have the crimes of the guy at the bar who date rapes people. We have the crimes of the human traffickers. And we have just about everything Father Marino does from page 1 until the end. Now, what I find to be interesting is all of the human antagonists do not take no as an answer, and they have no respect whatsoever for other humans. However, on the flip side, we have the goddess who never existed in human form, yet she has the common decency to ask Fernanda if she can literally be inside her. And as she's waiting for this consent, she explains to Fernanda what she can expect with this possession, and the goddess is 100% truthful with it. So it was really cool to see how the author tackled a subject this important. Another subject this book focuses on is religious fanaticism. And with that, it comments on the amount of blind faith and instant trust a person is willing to invest in a church or preacher without asking any questions whatsoever. Now, unfortunately, I can't elaborate on this too much due to spoilers, but all I can say is Father Marino is a wolf in sheep's clothing who will do whatever it takes to prove he's right. And while we have him as an antagonist, Fernanda's mother is the type of person who instantly trusts him for no other reason than he is simply presenting himself as a man of God, which, as we all know, not all men of God are actually godly men. With themes aside, I really loved the culture that this book introduced to me because until I finished my read, I didn't realize an actual goddess of filth existed. So, yeah, obviously, I loved this book because of its originality, its topics, and because I was actually able to learn something. But with that said, unfortunately, the book didn't scare me, creep me out, or gross me out. However, it was very fast paced and I couldn't put it down. Goddess of Filth was my first time ever reading V. Castro. And I really feel like this is a great introduction to the author if you've never read her before, because it does a great job showing her style and her creativity. And since I enjoyed this book as much as what I did, I've already included a few more titles of hers to my library. But at the end of the day, if you are looking for a coming of age summer read that is in the possession subgenre, then I do highly recommend Goddess of Filth, as it's fast paced, it's entertaining, it's original, and you also get to learn as you read. Not to mention, this is a thin book that can be knocked out in one sitting. Well, now that we're at the end of this video, I would like to thank these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account as well, I have a link available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos like what you see here. Also, I do have a $10 tier available where for $10 a month, I'll still give you the shout out that you see here, but I do creepy photography on the side. So included in that bundle, you will receive one creepy photo at the beginning of every month. From there, you can print off that photo and do whatever you like with it. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. Also, if you would like to follow me on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram are all available in the description section of this episode. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I have more videos coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you're doing well and sweet nightmares.